Welcome to the history section. We are focusing today on a period so intensely formative that it practically serves as the origin story for one of history's most consequential figures, William, Duke of Normandy, later known as the Conqueror. The specific period is the pivotal year of his life, approximately 1041.
Yes, around that time.
We're examining the documented shift that occurred around the age of 13, marking his transition from a dangerous period of minority and hidden survival to active, though still advised, governance.
The emphasis on this single year is highly warranted. The archival record is often fragmentary for the early 11th century. It makes it impossible to pin down certain political maneuvers to the exact month.
Right.
But this era, 1041, unequivocally signals the end of William's passive survival. Prior to this point, his very existence was, an ongoing state of emergency.
A constant crisis.
A relentless cycle of near misses and escapes, dictated by the singular need to stay alive long enough to actually rule. From this point forward, the dynamic changes entirely.
So what changes?
The initiation of his military apprenticeship begins, alongside the grim, formal education in statecraft. This raw, brutal introduction to the realities of power fundamentally shaped his political cynicism and, consequently, every strategic decision he made, from managing the duchy all the way to the conquest itself.
The contrast between William's life at age 12 and age 13 is almost unbelievable.
It's night and day.
Imagine a world where one day you were a ghost. You're constantly being moved under the cover of darkness, sleeping in hidden corners of fortified keeps, your life hanging by the thread of a single loyal guardian.
That was the reality.
That was the reality of his life at 12, defined by hiding in the dark, driven by the absolute necessity of evading numerous assassination attempts. These weren't just rumors, they were launched by rival claimants and ambitious barons who saw the ducal minority as a political free-for-all.
And then the next figurative day, age 13, represents standing, exposed in the light. He transitioned from being a perpetual victim whose main job was simply staying breathing to becoming a necessary figurehead.
He was thrust into public view and active political life.
And this elevation wasn't a graduation. It was an immediate high-stakes exposure. It demanded immediate difficult political decisions made by his remaining regents, but ostensibly in his name.
To grasp the magnitude of this shift, we really must define the political landscape of Normandy during those minority years.
Yeah.
Say from 1035 to 1041.
Precisely. The death of Duke Robert de Gacé, William's father, on pilgrimage left a power vacuum of immense size. Robert III, though capable, had only one heir, William, and that heir was illegitimate.
A huge problem in that era.
A massive one. Norman customary law regarding succession was still, fluid, but illegitimacy provided a massive legal loophole for ambitious distant relatives and powerful landholders to challenge William's authority. The chaos of the minority created unprecedented opportunities for these ambitious, violent barons to carve out their own principalities within the duchy.
So we're not talking about petty squabbles.
Oh, not at all. This was widespread decentralized anarchy. Barons like Guy of Burgundy, William's own cousin, and various other regional lords began acting as sovereign rulers.
How so? What were they doing specifically?
They were building illegal castles fortifications that were historically restricted to the duke alone, and seizing ducal revenues.
So they were cutting off his money and building power bases.
Exactly. The ducal treasury was essentially empty because taxes couldn't be collected outside the few core loyal territories. So William was not simply waiting for his enemies to kill him. By 1041, the political threat environment required active management.
The strategy had to change.
The shift we observe means he was now expected to show his face, physically present himself, even if only symbolically, during crucial administrative and military undertakings. This lent his name and the indispensable ducal authority to the actions of his protectors. If William was to rule, he needed to be seen ruling. The list of his fallen protectors is long.
So the safety strategy was absolute secrecy and rapid movement. Now the strategy is visibility. He's no longer safe in the dark. He must become powerful in the light. This exposure is terrifyingly risky, but it is the only way to reestablish the legitimacy of the ducal title.
In the eyes of the populace, and crucially, the King of France.
And this brings us to the documentation itself.
Yes, the nature of the documentary record shifts profoundly around 1041. Prior to this, the accounts are anecdotal. They're focused on near misses, escapes, the lamentable fate of his murdered guardians. They are personal histories.
Stories of survival.
Exactly. The events recorded for this pivotal year, however, signify the start of a clear, actionable administrative and military record. We begin to see land grants, charters confirming ducal rights, and more importantly, military summonses issued in his name.
Which is the key detail.
It is. For a ruler who has begun to participate in the command structure, even as a highly protected teenager, this necessary documentation allows historians to track the initiation of his active role. It illustrates that the boy had indeed moved beyond mere passive survival to the initial, albeit highly controlled, stages of political command. This paper trail is the evidence of his public transition.
As we move into the specifics of 1041, we have to look at the immediate catalyst for this radical restructuring of William's security.
The trigger event.
Just preceding this moment, the assassination of William's steward Osborne had left the young duke without a trusted primary administrative and military guardian.
Osborne had been a critical link, ensuring the to even greater vulnerability.
So this vacuum of leadership necessitated immediate, ruthless political action.
Action that had to be taken not on the basis of trust or affection, but solely on the basis of raw, available military power.
Which brings us directly to the introduction of the replacement protector.
Ralph de Gacé.
Tell us about him.
The Loyalist faction, desperate to fill the gap left by Osborne's death, had to seek out the most fearsome, effective military leader they could find who could be brought into the ducal fold, regardless of their past allegiances or crimes.
So his resume was less important than his capability.
His capabilities were everything. Ralph de Gacé's appointment was purely pragmatic. He was a veteran of the bloody internal conflicts, a ruthless commander capable of holding the loyal core of the army together and, perhaps more importantly, intimidating the turbulent baronial class who were still weighing whether or not to strike at the Duke.
But the profound irony and the true political cost of this arrangement must be highlighted. We've established that Gacé was brought in to protect William from his enemies.
Yes.
But the research shows that Ralph de Gacé was known to be among the murderers of William's first guardian, Gilbert of Brion,
Who had been assassinated years earlier, potentially by Gacé's family members or his associates.
Yes. Think about that political dynamic. The Duke, the target of years of assassination plots, is now placed under the direct protection of a man implicated in the murder of one of his most loyal foundational kinsmen.
It's not just irony. It is the ultimate demonstration of Norman realpolitik.
A devil's bargain.
Completely. This was not a choice based on trust, reconciliation, or even political convenience. It was a decision based on the simple, terrifying calculus of power. The question was, who can physically protect the ducal line right now?
And Gacé was the answer.
Gacé possessed the sheer military and psychological capability to stabilize the duchy's core. William had to suppress any personal horror, fear, or grief and accept protection from the very man or the man representing the faction who had killed his childhood associate. It required a certain outcome.
It's an incredibly cynical lesson for a 13-year-old.
But a necessary one for survival in his world. If a man was a brutal, effective soldier who could command the army and ensure stability, then personal loyalty, moral deficiency, or even past treachery against the ducal line could be overlooked for the sake of the greater political good.
Which for William was his own survival.
And, by extension, the survival of the duchy. This taught him that the effectiveness of a lieutenant in achieving political goals was the only metric that truly mattered, eclipsing personal feelings.
And this established a foundation of ruthlessness that was absolutely crucial for his future. The ability to deal with men who had previously been enemies, simply because they possessed the military capability he lacked, became a cornerstone of his pragmatic governance.
It did.
But let's pause and consider the alternative. Why not choose someone else? Was there no one else?
The list of truly loyal, effective commanders who had survived the minority was perilously short. The constant assassinations had decimated the ranks of his immediate, trustworthy kin.
So the pool of candidates was very small.
And the remaining loyalists were often men of spiritual authority or minor barons who lacked the widespread martial influence needed to challenge the powerful, entrenched rebel families. Gacé was a necessary evil.
And rejecting him would have meant what?
The continuation of decentralized chaos. It would have guaranteed William's eventual downfall. By accepting Gacé, William essentially bought time, leveraging Gacé's personal ruthlessness against the chaos that threatened to consume the duchy.
So, by accepting Ralph de Gacé, William signaled, perhaps unconsciously at age 13, but definitely by deed, the elevation of political survival and military efficiency over any sense of personal feelings or abstract morality.
It was a harsh, quick education in the nature of loyalty in the Norman world.
It was not inherent.
No, it was transactional, enforced by the immediate threat of violence. It prepared him for a future where he would routinely co-opt and integrate dangerous, ambitious, but effective figures into his own command structure, knowing exactly how fragile and conditional their allegiance was.
Having accepted Gacé, the man who embodied pure utility and immediate military efficacy, what was the first high-stakes test that demonstrated his value to the young Duke?
Well, the immediate benefit of having a commander like Ralph de Gacé was swiftly put to the test. This transition period was immediately followed by what was likely the first major military campaign William witnessed in person as the nominal head of the ducal army.
The revolt of Thurston-Lagos.
The Viscount of the Hainaut. This event forced the young duke to confront organized betrayal and publicly exercise his newfound highly advised authority.
Thurston's betrayal was calculated then. It wasn't just a spontaneous uprising.
Oh, absolutely. The Viscount was a powerful figure in the Hainaut region and recognized that William's fragile legitimacy offered an opportunity for advancement. He capitalized on power, offered an opportunity to secure greater autonomy. So Thurston openly defied ducal authority, garrisoning the strategically vital castle of Falaise against William.
And the choice of Falaise was critical.
Highly personal. Falaise was not merely a strategic fortress, it was intimately connected to William's identity.
It was William's birthplace.
The very location where his mother, Herleva, had lived, and where he himself was conceived and spent his early, relatively peaceful years. Taking arms against the Duke in his own home was the ultimate act of disrespect.
A symbolic and military challenge to his birthright.
Absolutely. If William could not reclaim his birthplace, his authority anywhere else in Normandy would be permanently suspect.
So the response, orchestrated by Ralph de Gacé, was swift and decisive.
It reflected Gacé's military urgency. Ralph quickly raised forces in William's name, and this point is crucial. Gacé used William's seal and authority to legitimize the mobilization.
Transforming a local baronial skirmish into a sanctioned ducal campaign.
Exactly. They marched to besiege the castle. Though Ralph was undoubtedly the tactical commander, the legal and physical act of besieging the castle was performed under William's direct, though physically limited, authority. The soldiers were fighting for the legitimate Duke of Normandy, not just for a powerful local lord.
And what was William's role during this siege? He was only 13.
His role was one of crucial visible presence. He was required to be at the siege lines. For a boy who had spent most of his young life hiding from assassins, this was his raw, unfiltered introduction to the logistics, the tedium, the filth, and the sudden, explosive violence of high-stakes conflict.
We must imagine the psychological effect on the young Duke.
It must have been profound. He was forced to watch his own army attack the massive stone walls of his childhood home, understanding that the only way to reclaim his birthright and secure his future was through military force directed against his own people.
That experience would have been physically and psychologically taxing. Siege warfare in the 11th century was not a quick affair.
Not at all. It involved constructing massive earthworks, building temporary wooden fortifications, or bastides, to protect the besieging force, and waiting.
You were exposed to disease, the dust and heat of the summer, or the bitter cold of a protracted wait.
The noise of the trebuchets, the smell of unwashed men and campfires, the continuous sound of picks and shovels as they tried to mine under the walls, the sight of wounded men. This was William's military socialization.
It taught him, not in the schoolroom, but in the grim physical reality of a military encampment, that governance was inextricably linked to the efficient and relentless projection of violence.
The research confirms this as a critical element in hardening his outlook. It taught him the cost of rebellion not in abstract political terms, but in the immediate physical reality of suffering and destruction.
So what was the outcome of the siege?
The outcome of the Siege of Falaise reinforced the transition. Thurston, facing the determined forces under the Duke's standard, eventually surrendered.
And his punishment?
Thurston's punishment was exile, a common and politically expedient punishment for aristocrats who often held too much sway or commanded too many kinsmen to be simply executed without provoking a massive blood feud.
So the success of the siege, performed under William's banner, served as a critical psychological moment.
The boy Duke was publicly seen reclaiming his birthright and against powerful internal enemies.
And this public display was absolutely vital.
It was. It re-legitimized ducal authority in the eyes of the remaining turbulent nobility, showing that the minority, for all its chaos, was officially over. The Duke could fight, and the Duke could win.
Having established a degree of internal military control by quashing Thurston's revolt and cementing this uneasy alliance with Ralph de Gacé, the focus then shifts.
Outward, to secure essential external validation.
During this highly volatile period, it became crucial to formalize the relationship between William and his feudal overlord, King Henry III of France. This is not merely a polite ceremony.
No, it was a deeply strategic move that carried concrete legal and military weight, further solidifying William's inherently unstable position.
And King Henry III of France was watching the anarchy unfold in Normandy with great concern.
Of course. Normandy was one of the largest and most powerful fiefdoms in France, and its instability threatened Henry's own borders and authority.
So what did he do?
Seeing the widespread internal warfare that the minority had unleashed, Henry II made the decisive political move to formally knight William around this time. Historical consensus places the knighting ceremony itself between age 13 and 15.
A typical age for high nobility.
Yes, reflecting a typical initiation into adulthood. But the initiation of this process, the political decision that the Duke needed this formal status to stabilize his region, falls squarely within this 1041 transitional period.
Why was this so important to Henry?
By knighting William, Henry Wyatt was essentially confirming that the young Duke, despite his illegitimacy and the instability of his realm, was still the legitimate holder of the fiefdom of Normandy.
So it was a message to William's rivals.
A very clear message. This decision denied William's various cousins and rivals, like Guy of Burgundy or the Montgomerys, the crucial external support they needed from the French crown to press their own claims. It was Henry I's investment in stability.
He was ensuring that a weakened but still loyal duke remained in power rather than allowing the territory to splinter to warring, uncontrollable baronies.
Exactly. And the legal significance of the knighting ceremony was transformative within the feudal system. Receiving arms directly from the king represented the official ceremonial transition within the feudal hierarchy.
William moved officially from a child, to a man.
A man who possessed full legal capacity. In the rigid structure of the 11th century feudal world, vir status was necessary for a noble to fully exercise the rights of his domain.
So what rights did that confer specifically?
Prior to this, William's regents acted for him, relying on delegated authority that could be questioned by rebellious barons. After knighting, William could legally act himself. This meant he gained the capacity to administer high justice, which included the right to authorize executions. He gained the right to hold his own supreme court, and the capacity to levy taxes and feudal dues beyond the specific limited levies normally imposed on a child ward.
So the practical implications extended far beyond just having a sword.
Far beyond. This conferral of status provided William with the necessary legal standing to command troops in his own name without needing a massive step beyond the pure reliance on his advisors' delegated authority.
So even though he was still heavily advised...
Absolutely. He remained dependent on their military capability for years, but he now possessed the fundamental legal legitimacy required of a duke. This legitimacy, granted by the highest legitimate authority in France, made his subsequent actions and decrees indisputable in the eyes of the broader feudal structure.
It significantly strengthened his hand against internal dissent.
It shifted the challenge for the barons. They were no longer fighting a child and his guardians. They were fighting a legally recognized duke backed by the King of France.
While William was busy reclaiming his birthplace and securing this external validation, another major player was attempting to assert itself in the region.
The Church.
We have to examine the parallel attempts to stabilize Normandy through religious authority. Specifically, the movement known as the Truce of God.
Or Tréguier. It was being actively promoted and, well, they tried to enforce it. Bishops across Normandy and northern France around 1041, 1042.
What was it exactly?
It was a concerted effort by the ecclesiastical hierarchy to curtail the devastating private wars between Norman barons by banning fighting on specific holy days. A noble but ultimately futile attempt to inject morality into the chaos.
So the Tréguier movement was born out of sheer necessity.
Absolutely. Local authorities across France realized the crown and the duke were too weak to prevent localized constant violence. The church attempted to create islands of peace by decreeing that no fighting could occur from Wednesday evening until Monday morning and during major feast days like Lent and Advent.
The goal being to drastically limit the time available for private warfare.
Thereby protecting the peasantry and commercial routes. The penalties were severe. excommunication from the church, and theoretically damnation.
And that threat, eternal damnation, is the highest spiritual consequence imaginable in the 11th century.
It is.
But the reality observed by William, the newly formalized duke, provided a crucial lesson about the limits of spiritual authority when it's divorced from secular power.
The 13-year-old duke was forced to witness his powerful, violent barons entirely ignore the church's decrees.
The mandate of the Truce of God had virtually no practical enforcement mechanism.
None. Not in the face of local military power. Barons continued their feuds, their land grabs, and their violence whenever it suited their interests, regardless of whether it was a Sunday or a major saint's feast day.
Thurston Legos, for example.
He had launched his revolt despite the church's condemnation of such internal warfare of their lord.
This observation would have been a profoundly sobering moment for a young ruler focused on bringing order back to his realm.
To watch the outright failure of the church's attempt to impose order through persuasion and spiritual threat, it provided a crucial, chilling observation.
That religious authority alone was completely insufficient to impose order or stop Norman violence.
The men who ruled Normandy, the ruthless, land-hungry barons, feared their neighboring barons' standing army far more than they feared excommunication.
Which they could often just ignore or have lifted through political maneuvering.
Exactly. If the church could not enforce peace, who could? Only the duke, by overwhelming force.
And this experience directly shaped William's later mature policy regarding the church.
It did, both in Normandy and later in England following 1066. He learned that peace could not be achieved merely through spiritual persuasion or moral appeals. It required the secular, terrifying force of the ducal army to back it up.
Peace, in his view, had to be enforced with the sword.
Terrifying the volatile nobility into obedience. The failure of the Trigadé taught William a vital strategic lesson about the necessary hierarchy of power. He would become a great patron of the church, rebuilding monasteries and appointing bishops, but only after ensuring the church's moral mandates were supported by his own overwhelming military might.
He established a strict synthesis of secular and ecclesiastical power.
A synthesis that would define his reign. He understood that order must precede piety, and that the only true sovereign in Normandy was the one who controlled the largest, most effective, and most feared army, capable of crushing baronial...
Edition of 1041, we see a complete and brutal transformation of the Duke. This year stripped William of his status as a passive child and thrust him into the role of a hardened political apprentice.
It was a year defined by the acceptance of necessary ruthlessness in the form of accepting Ralph de Gacé.
The psychological baptism of reclaiming his home during the physical and protracted Siege of Falaise.
The essential external validation of King Henry II's knighthood, which conferred full legal status upon him.
And the core observation that secular power must precede spiritual piety in the establishment of political order.
The very foundations of the future conqueror, his political coldness, his military efficacy, and his understanding of sovereignty were poured in this single year of intense, pragmatic learning.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning something new. That's all for now, but in case you didn't notice, there are a lot more episodes on this subject available right now. If you're enjoying these historical podcasts, please like and subscribe and share with other history buffs.
While this is an AI recording, the research that has gone into this production is comprehensive and focuses on very specific moments in history, designed to bring as much detail to the listener as possible.